Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Bible Explained, the show where I take my master's degree and apply it to the Bible, line by line, word by word, and go through it from start to finish and explain very important things, unique things, and give some thoughts and opinions much greater than what you would get at a Sunday school or a Bible study. We recently just went through the sons of Noah, the generations of Noah, and that was the recap of what we just explored. And so, what ended up happening is that God selected Noah and Noah's family, the ones that were holy enough to make it, and everyone else were horrible sinners. God flooded the earth. Noah came out of the ark, and the previous chapter, extremely boring because it just explains where the lineage comes from, who is who, where is where, and it starts name dropping locations. And now we're here. We're going to be discussing Tower of Babel today. So if you want to get caught up, you can check the previous videos where I discussed those. But today it is the Tower of Babel. This is a very well-known location in pop culture today in everything. You talk to someone, you say, hey, you know about Tower of Babel? Somebody might know, very surface level knowledge, but it is very widely known. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. So I want to start out with a prayer and thank Christ and God for the forgiveness for sin and keeping me as holy as possible. So we're going to begin with chapter 11 in Genesis. I'm in the New International Version, but I swap between King James Version and New International. You can use any version. These are the versions that I just happen to use as kind of a point to check on, but you can cross-check with different versions. Different versions have different wording, and that's the only difference. That's the only reason you would want to use a different version, just to cross-check and make sure that the wording made sense. We're going to begin with Genesis 11, chapter 1. Now the whole world had one language, a common speech. Verse 2, as the people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. So, the important takeaway here, now the whole world, okay? So let me begin by emphasizing. The Bible here did not state the descendants of Noah and all of his family had one language. It didn't say all of humanity had only one language. It didn't say in this country everybody spoke the language. It said the whole world. So again, it's important to note what exactly is being said here. And it says common speech. One language, common speech. So imagine if the whole world spoke English. There you go. And then it discusses where people were moving from. Now, Noah and the settling point and where we're at right now doesn't really matter, because eastward is Shinar, and that's where we're at. Verse 3, they said to each other, come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly. They used brick instead of stone, and tar for the mortar. Verse 4, then they said, come, let us build ourselves a city, with a tower that reaches the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered on the face of the whole earth. Now this is extremely strange, and it's a very, very strange thought process. I say to yourself, if you're the only person on the planet and you have several people with you, but like you guys really are it, right? You say to yourself, we're going to make a big city, okay? And we're going to make a giant tower, because if we don't make this tower, people are just going to get lost, and they're going to be all over the place. And we don't want that. We want everyone together so everyone doesn't die. It sounds a little silly to me. It's more like, hey, Jim, John, Billy Bob, Wendy, Jenny, Jessica, if you guys would be so kind as to, not wander off and die, that would be great. Something like that could have been said. There's plenty of villages, there's plenty of settlements through the history that did not have a giant tower to prevent them from scattering. And a lot of these villages and remnants have roots in great civilizations. The Roman Empire, we have Europe, we have China, Africa, And even though these people didn't have this giant, massive tower, they weren't scattered across the face of the earth. So it's very strange that this would be the logical conclusion. But that was the reason for doing that. Here's the problem, though. The good Lord did scatter them all over the earth. And the good Lord did say, go out and conquer the earth. And this is, I would say, an inadvertent sin or attempt to circumvent God's desire. So there's plenty of reasons that could be speculated why God wanted people to go out and not stay together necessarily in one location. And logically speaking, one of the reasons is likely disease, sin, pestilence, laziness. All of those things come when you're in a contained city. Just take a look back at the plague that had occurred. Lots of rodents, lots of infestations. Well, that's bad stuff. So that's why it's very important to understand this point right here, where a lot of people just don't understand what happened with Babel. This is what happened. Verse 8, so the Lord scattered them all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. Now, again, I'd like to point this out. It doesn't note that they were scattered. This specifically says God scattered them. How did God scatter them? That's really a good question, because it doesn't exactly explain that. Did God take his hand down and just throw people all over the place? Or did the Lord's Spirit give them the desire to explore, adventure, and go to different locations? Again, that's a good question. You can look back at the generations of Noah in the previous segment, and you can note that not everybody did settle in Shinar. Other people went different locations to build their own kingdoms for whatever reason. So we're going to continue on. Verse 9, that is why it was called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there, the Lord scattered them over the face of the earth. Now, this is the reason that God scattered them. This is logically the reason. But we have to go back, and I skipped ahead for a very specific reason, to explain that this is what ended up happening. This is why this happened. And if you connect the two, scatter. So man did not want to be scattered over the face of the earth. And in verse 8, the Lord scattered them over the earth. So we're going to go back and we're going to read it all at once. So they, in verse 3 and 4, we're going to bake bricks. We're going to use tar for the mortar, and we're going to build a tower to the heavens. Okay, so we won't be scattered over the earth. Now, verse 5. But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. Verse 6. The Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Verse 7. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other. Many people would take this point specifically, and they would say, that's really messed up that God would do that. We had a united people. We had people who were for God completely, right? These are Noah's descendants. These were the holiest of people. God killed all the previous sinners, if you recall, flooded the earth. They're all gone. Only the best individuals were selected. Now they're building a giant tower. They're building a giant city. The Lord comes down. He wants to see. He wants to see what they're doing. He sees the city and the tower. And he says, if they're going to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Again, this is before a lot of corruption occurred. These individuals are not stupid, right? So either here the Lord is afraid of what could happen, or the fact is that they are combining together and using each other instead of relying upon God. And when the Lord said, scatter yourselves across the earth and become plentiful, basically procreate and take control of Earth. Instead, they stayed in one centralized location, building up a giant city and a tower to heaven, which is somewhat, again, an affront to God. The reason that they were doing it was not in defiance of God, but rather that they wouldn't be scattered across the earth. So this is a roundabout way of saying, hey, God, we hear your commandments, we just don't want to heed them, right? So verse 8, so the Lord scattered them from there all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there, the Lord scattered them all over the face of the earth. Many people say it was the four corners. I disagree. It says all over the earth, so they're all over the place. And we do have evidence to support that pretty much humanity's been in all over every location there possibly is. There's people who will sit here and try and say humanity originated from this location and expanded out, which is also true, but there are just places where people are settled, and we have history of that, and it's just very strange that they would choose to settle there. But that could be correlated with this right here. So we're moving on. Verse 10, this is an account of the Shem's family line. 2 years after the flood, when Shem was 100 years old, he became the father of Arphaxad. Verse 11, and after he became the father of Arphaxad, Shem lived 500 years and had sons and daughters. Verse 12, when Arphaxad had lived 35 years, he had become the father of Shelah. Verse 13, after he became the father of Shelah, Arphaxad lived 403 years and had other sons and daughters. But please note that it continuously says had other sons and daughters, and only name drops one important one for each one of these. Very, very strange, unique wording, but this is what the Bible does. Verse 13, when Shelah had lived 30 years, he became the father of Eber. And after he became the father of Eber, Shelah lived 403 years and had other sons and daughters. Verse 16, after Eber had lived 34 years, he became father of Peleg. And after becoming the father of Peleg, Eber lived 430 years and had other sons and daughters. Verse 18, when Peleg had lived 30 years, he became the father of Reu. And after he became the father of Reu, Peleg lived 209 years and had other sons and daughters. Verse 20, when Reu had lived 32 years, he became the father of Serug. And after he had become the father of Serug, he lived 207 years and had other sons and daughters. And I don't know if you notice, but the age is gradually decreasing a lot. We started with 500. Now we're at around 200. Verse 22, when Serug had lived 30 years, he became the father of Nahor. And after he became the father of Nahor, Serug lived 200 years and had other sons and daughters. Verse 24, and when Nahor had lived 29 years, he became the father of Terah. And after he had become the father of Terah, Nahor lived 119 years and had other sons and daughters. Now we're almost at 100 years. Verse 26, after Terah had lived 70 years, he became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. So there you go. Right there, we have interesting an account of the generations. This is Shem's family. Shem came after the flood 2 years. Shem was 100 years old at the time when he had become the father. And now we are going into the Abram's family. This is an account of the Terah's family line. Verse 27, Terah became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran became the father of Lot. Again, name-dropping very important people in the Bible. And if you notice, we go back up here, we have tons of other sons and daughters, other sons and daughters, other sons and daughters. Not important enough to name-drop or mention. Here we have Abram, Nahor, Haran, and father of Lot. Verse 28, while his father, Terah, was still alive, Haran died in Ur of Chaldeans, in the land of his birth. Verse 29, Abram and Nahor both married. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. She was the daughter of Haran, the father of both Milcah and Iscah. Verse 30, now Sarai was childless, because she was not able to conceive. Verse 31, Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abram, and together they set out from Ur of the Chaldeans to Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. So they wanted to go to Canaan, but they settled in Haran. Verse 32, Terah lived 205 years, and he died in Haran. So there you go. We have quite a lot here. It's important to establish, because this lineage here is going to date back and link Jesus Christ to the holiest of people. And without that link, without that lineage, it is a big issue, it is a big problem. And we get the story of the Tower of Babel. But I want you to note that the Tower of Babel story is so insignificant compared to the rest of this chapter here. We have verses 10 all the way to 32 focused on people and generations, and the Tower of Babel is verse 1 through 8, ending and culminating with 9, which means only a third of this chapter, less than, is dedicated to the Tower of Babel. Though culture, pop culture, and a lot of people and a lot of references really make it out to be a huge thing, it truly isn't. It is just a story about people not listening to God, wanting to stay together instead of spreading themselves across the earth. The good Lord did not want people to sit in cities, to have very small to little to no land, suffer from pestilence, suffer from famine, suffer from many different things, sin primarily. The Lord wanted people to go out, take their land, claim it, and live a good life. Farm, harvest, slaughter animals if need be. But the good Lord wanted to provide plenty of land for people so that they would have a good life, not be in a clustered, tiny little space. Even in heaven, when asked, Jesus explains that there are mansions in heaven. He didn't say houses. He does not say, you don't need a house, you're perfect. He doesn't say, oh, small houses, oh, tiny houses. He doesn't say, this city that's compacted together. He says mansions, huge mansions. So this is the important takeaway here. A lot of people put a lot of emphasis on the Tower of Babel, but the truth is it was just people sinning and being really, really stupid. So there's the takeaway there, and we have more generations. In the next one, we're going to be discussing what here? Let's see here. The call of Abram. And that's very important because we actually start to get into another very well-known story of Abram in Egypt and all that stuff. So you'll want to come back for that one. I hope you guys did enjoy this exploration of the Bible. Not exactly the most exciting as we're talking about generations yet again, but equally important. Again, I invite you to accept Christ. We're all sinners. Nobody can be perfect. And attempting to live a perfect life without Christ is impossible, or God is impossible. So just accept Christ. Just, hey, you know what? I am a sinner. I accept that. And I accept that Jesus made a way for me to make it to heaven. That's all you have to do. Very simple, very easy. And hopefully you did make that prayer. If you didn't, continue to listen, continue to explore the Bible. Or if you have some more concerning questions, feel free to comment down in the section below.